This is Deuteronomy 23. Moses is still delivering law. We come now to some new law. The first 8 verses are going to raise some very disturbing questions. Please wait for the explanation at the end of verse 8. Verse 1, He who is emasculated by crushing or cutting shall not enter into Yahweh's assembly. Comment, the Hebrew here specifies the organ, it's shafkah, which means penis. Anyone with a crushed or cut penis may not enter Yahweh's assembly. Of course, a man's penis might have been crushed or severed for reasons beyond his control, so why does Yahweh exclude him from the assembly? We should remember that all of us has a physical defect here and there, so if Yahweh requires us to be whole, we're in trouble. Before we try to sort this out, let's move on to the next few verses where we find Yahweh excluding others from the assembly for reasons also beyond their control. Verse 2, A person born of a forbidden union shall not enter into Yahweh's assembly, even to the 10th generation shall no one of his enter into Yahweh's assembly. Comment, certainly a person born of a forbidden union isn't responsible for the circumstances of his or her birth. But how about that 10th generation? If every generation has 3 children, there's going to be 521,441 excluded children in the 10th generation alone. If we look at it another way, barring any inbreeding, every individual has 2 parents, 4 grandparents, and 8 grandparents, and so on. Going back 10 generations, every individual has 2,047 total ancestors. For you and me, what are the chances that we have at least one ancestor out of 2,047 that was born of an illegitimate union? And since people keep these things as quiet as possible, how would we know? And if a married woman commits adultery, not even she will know for sure if her baby is the product of her legitimate union with her husband or one of her illegitimate unions. So what could she tell her child about his ancestry, even if she were open and upfront about it? So as a matter of fact, no one can give an account of himself to the 10th generation. We happen to know for a fact that this law would affect a large part of the tribe of Judah. Many of them are descended from the forbidden union of Judah and his daughter-in-law Tamar, Genesis chapter 38 and Leviticus 18:15. But we don't see the law being enforced. Verse 3, An Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter into Yahweh's assembly. Even to the 10th generation shall no one belonging to them enter into Yahweh's assembly forever. Comment, here again, how would anyone in Israel know whether they have an Ammonite or a Moabite to the 10th generation? We know for a fact that only 2 or 3 generations from Moses, an Israelite named Boaz will marry a Moabitess named Ruth, Ruth 4:13. Ruth became King David's great-grandmother, according to Matthew chapter 1. So was David excluded from the assembly? According to this commandment, he most definitely should have been. Now coming up, Moses gives the reason that Ammonites and Moabites should be excluded, verse 4. Because they didn't meet you with bread and water on the way when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you. Nevertheless, Yahweh your God wouldn't listen to Balaam, but Yahweh your God turned the curse into a blessing to you because Yahweh your God loved you. You shall not seek their peace nor their prosperity all your days forever. Comment, so let everyone be put on notice. Certainly somebody somewhere in your ancestry has made Yahweh very angry. Verse 6, You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, because you lived as a foreigner in his land. The children of the 3rd generation who are born to them may enter into Yahweh's assembly. Comment, so there's a long list of people who can't enter Yahweh's assembly. For practical purposes, it includes everybody. Jesus brought the reason and logic to this situation, which should have been obvious to everyone from the beginning. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. No one qualifies to enter Yahweh's assembly. Jesus told of 2 people, both of them dared to enter the temple. I'll read the entire passage from Luke 18. This is Jesus speaking. Quote, 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and was praying this to himself. God, I thank you that I am not like other people, swindlers, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing some distance away, was even unwilling to lift up his eyes to heaven, but was beating his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, the sinner. I tell you that this man went to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted." End quote. So let's summarize the first 8 verses of this chapter. If we read the law of Moses with comprehension and understanding, we know that we cannot enter Yahweh's assembly according to the law. All we can do is beat our breasts and ask for an exception to the law. And we can't look down on any Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Egyptian, person with a deformity, or anyone else. Now on to instructions about military camps. Verse 9. When you go out and camp against your enemies, then you shall keep yourselves from every evil thing. If there is among you any man who is not clean by reason of that which happens him by night, then shall he go outside of the camp. He shall not come within the camp. But it shall be, when evening comes, he shall bathe himself in water. When the sun is down, he shall come within the camp. You shall have a place also outside of the camp where you go relieve yourself. You shall have a trowel among your weapons. It shall be, when you relieve yourself, you shall dig with it, and shall turn back and cover your excrement. For Yahweh your God walks in the middle of your camp to deliver you, and to give up your enemies before you. Therefore your camp shall be holy, that he may not see an unclean thing in you and turn away from you. Comment, verse 14, Yahweh walks in the middle of Israel's camp. So it's a place of Yahweh's particularly strong presence, somewhat comparable to the tent of meeting. Therefore the soldiers should keep themselves ceremonially clean and behave respectfully, just as they would if they were about to visit the tent of meeting. Now for another series of miscellaneous laws, verse 15. You shall not deliver to his master a servant who has escaped from his master to you. He shall dwell with you, among you, in the place which he shall choose within one of your gates, where it pleases him best. You shall not oppress him. Comment, this law speaks volumes about the nature of servitude in Israel. Verse 15, you shall not deliver to his master a servant who has escaped. Verse 16, he can go and stay wherever he pleases in Israel. This law is going to have one very obvious effect. Masters had better not abuse their servants, or they'll wake up one day and the servant will be gone, and there's nothing they can do about it. Verse 17, there shall be no prostitute of the daughters of Israel, neither shall there be a sodomite of the sons of Israel. Comment, there's no mention of homosexual activity in the Bible without condemnation. Verse 18, you shall not bring the hire of a prostitute or the wages of a male prostitute into the house of Yahweh your God for any vow, for both of these are an abomination to Yahweh your God. You should not lend on interest to your brother, interest of money, interest of food, interest of anything that is lent on interest. You may lend on interest to a foreigner, but to your brother you shall not lend on interest, that Yahweh your God may bless you and all that you put your hand to in the land where you go in to possess it. Comment, no charging interest to a fellow Israelite. Yahweh will bless the hand that charges no interest. It will have the Midas touch, we would say. Verse 21, when you vow a vow to Yahweh your God, you shall not be slack to pay it, for Yahweh your God will surely require it of you, and it would be sin in you. But if you refrain from making a vow, it shall be no sin in you. You shall observe and do that which is gone out of your lips. Whatever you have vowed to Yahweh your God as a freewill offering, which you have promised with your mouth, you must do. Comment, a vow to Yahweh is serious. Verse 23, if the vow made it out of your mind and onto your lips, you better pay up. The safe route is in verse 22. Just don't make the vow in the first place. Quote, if you refrain from making a vow, it shall be no sin to you. End quote. Verse 24, when you come into your neighbor's vineyard, then you may eat of grapes your fill at your own pleasure, but you shall not put any in your container. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, then you may pluck the ears with your hand, but you shall not move a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain. Comment, we might call it petty theft to pick a few grapes or grains of wheat out of our neighbor's field. Interestingly, in the law of Moses, it's not theft at all. Jesus' disciples picked grain as they walked with him along the way, Matthew 12:1. That's the chapter. Deuteronomy 24 is next at landofhavilah.net. Deuteronomy 24.